Funny to be talking about like all this like left brain stuff now after we just did like that whole deep dive, but yeah, got all the information to kind of support that that healing journey that we kind of went on, and that's the reason why I have this talk titled as Amanita muscaria, Healing Patterns of Trauma. The reason why is because we have these subconscious patterns that are from childhood, early, before precognition, pre-memory, and a lot of things that happen to us during that time actually can imprint the way we are and how we act in this world. And a lot of it is subconscious and seems like it's out of our control. And over the last couple of years of my life, I've actually been trying to like get deeper into the subconscious to make the subconscious conscious. And that has led me down a path with Amanita muscaria and other medicinal mushrooms and herbs. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just gonna go over briefly the some of the occult nature of Amanita, some of the mythology, the lore, and the indigenous use. So we have this mushroom that if you asked like 100 people to draw a mushroom, most of them would draw something that looks like this mushroom. Can everybody see this all right? Okay, cool. I can't see it at all. You know, we have the mushroom emoji. It's a Super Mario mushroom. It's the Alice in Wonderland mushroom. It's all throughout pop culture and Christmas greeting cards. You know, there's the you know, mythology around Santa Claus. So, you know, what is this mushroom? You know, there's so many beliefs around this mushroom, and we don't really know. Like, there's a lot of misinformation, but it's like the most iconic mushroom. And really that's like kind of the definition of a cult. It's hidden in plain sight. This mushroom grows on almost every single continent, different varieties, but they all contain the same psychoactive compounds, muscimol, ibotenic acid, which we'll get into the chemistry. But so what is this mushroom really about? Hopefully we can demystify some of the mythology around it and the misinformation. So before we get started, I just want to talk a little bit about my personal journey with Amanita to give you guys some context of where I'm coming from. So I had a lifelong habit with cannabis that was not healthy for me. Many people use this medicine and it's great for them. And for me, it was kind of hit or miss. I used it, I abused it, and it, you know, abused me. You know, I had a lot of paranoia and even psychosis and you know, addictive tendencies around it. Kind of always being obsessed with like my state of highness. And I had one evening where I absolutely knew I needed to quit using cannabis, and it synchronistically was the first time I ever heard about somebody microdosing Amanita muscaria. And I said to them, well, why would you microdose that? It's like the poisonous mushroom, you know, it's like hallucinogenic, like why would you do that? And nothing really came of that, but I started to wean myself off cannabis. And then coincidentally, 2 other people over the course of the next month had also taken Amanita muscaria and had good results. So, you know, I said, okay, well, you're not dead, all right, and you're not crazy, so like, what happened? And they said, well, not much happened during the experience, but it's been 2 weeks since I took it, and I still have this lasting sense of peace. And I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. So I started to do more research, and I discovered that this was a medicine I wanted to start working with. So I gathered caps, I bought them from a distributor, and started to make my own tea, and froze the tea into little ice cubes to make little microdose ice cubes that I would pop every day. and I started to really get a lot of benefits from it. I was able to sleep better. I was able to feel more content socially, like less social anxiety. Also, just like the feeling of craving was kind of gone. Like I felt more satisfied, and some of the compounds in Amanita have similar effects as Chantix, which is like the quit smoking drug. And through my business and my work, I've helped a lot of people get off of various pharmaceuticals and other addictions. So, yeah. So then, because I made this choice, which was one of the hardest decisions, because I had this dependency on cannabis, it was kind of like the universe was rewarding me, and my personal life and my business life began to flourish, and that's been about 3 years. So, so yeah, that's where I'm at today. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. So we have the historical use of Amanita muscaria with indigenous cultures. Actually, yeah, we'll go over some of the mythology first. So, how many of you are familiar with the Rig Veda or Soma? Okay, so the Rig Veda is an ancient Hindu text, and there is this concept called Soma, which is either a technology from like aliens or deities, or maybe a fungus or a plant, some kind of brew, some kind of technology. We're not really sure, but Gordon Wasson wrote a book called Soma and the Mushroom of Immortality, where he postulated that Soma was actually Amanita muscaria preparation that was properly decarbed through lactobacillus fermentation. So taking raw milk and combining it with Amanita muscaria and actually like decarbing it, which is how you prepare it safely, and having this brew. So there's some evidence for that. We also have the mythology around the Viking berserkers, which in Norway, modern day Norway, they had believed that there were this special class of Viking warriors called berserkers that would take various psychoactive plants or fungi and go off into battle, to the point where like even their allies would stay away from them because they're in this like drug crazed warpath, and they would kill anything in their sight. And there's some evidence, I mean, based on my personal experience, that I do see that I see the potential there, but I feel like it would probably be either a really high dose or something that was not fully decarbed. Like ibotenic acid is the compound that most people are trying to avoid with Amanita muscaria, and it can create a neuroexcitatory experience. So it stimulates glutamate in the body. It's very energizing and can, if in high amounts, probably put you into a frenzy. But I do think there's some more evidence that they may have also been consuming things like datura or henbane, which could put you in like a day, multi-day long violent craze. Because if you're consuming Amanita in a decarbed tea, you'd probably more or less want to take a nap. I don't really see people being like super violent, but there's always the potential.
So those caps you handed out, are those decarbed?
No, they're not fully decarbed.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's why I tell people just like take a nibble. But a lot of people aren't concerned about the caps in general. Like they take powdered mushrooms and put them in capsules, or they just nibble them. So it's kind of to each their own. Yeah. And then there's also some evidence that the Celts may have used Amanita muscaria. It's really kind of fuzzy on that, because for a couple reasons. The Celts didn't have a written language until like the last 500 years of their reign. When we think of Celts, we think of the British Isles like Ireland and England and Scotland. But really that was the last stronghold of where they were holding out against the Roman invaders. So the Celts originated around France and Italy, central and middle central Europe, and basically got wiped out and up until and chased out of mainland Europe. And they didn't have a written language, and also the Romans, anytime they would conquer a society, they would erase their history and their lineage. So that the Celts not having a written language, the Roman invaders, Christian invaders, that shamanic use of this plant sacrament may have been erased. But there are elements of truth. So like we have this red speckled salmon that was mentioned a lot in Celtic texts, and it's not just any salmon. It's like this red speckled salmon that like gives you immortality and like supernatural powers, and like so it's kind of like what's going on there, right? And that was a postulation made. Also the Celtic goddess Brigid, having red hair, and there's some other associations with her, as well as the magician tarot card, which is the wearing the red and the white, symbolizing the Amanita muscaria, that like Parker's cat right here. So that's just a little bit of some of the mythology, but we do know that there is historical use with the Sami people, which is northern Lapland, and the Siberian people. So the legend of Santa Claus may have been the Sami people in modern Lapland, which are reindeer herders or reindeer followers, as a Sami friend of mine says. They were nomadic people that followed the reindeer herds, or the caribou. Now the funny thing about caribou is that they love to eat this mushroom. They will like push you out of the way to go eat this mushroom, and they get drunk and they have fun off of this mushroom. And this may be the legend of the flying reindeer, and this man who comes through around the winter solstice and Christmas time, which is kind of like the tail end of the harvest season for Amanitas in the northern hemisphere, bearing red and white gifts that he carries on a sack, right? So where do the Amanitas grow? Under pine trees or Christmas trees. So the whole theory of that with the Santa Claus thing is that the Amanita muscaria is essentially this gift that these shamans are bringing people, and their front doors would be snowed in, so he would have to climb through not a chimney but a giant smoke hole on the roof, these local shamans, and either take the mushroom himself and ask what they needed as far as like spiritual guidance, or give them the mushroom and kind of be their shaman. But basically going to the spirit world and coming back with truth, right? So that's where some of the Santa Claus mythology comes in. And then the Siberian people, the indigenous Siberians, I think still to this day use Amanita muscaria. The Sami people don't as much. But there is I think a youth revival starting to pick up that indigenous knowledge. Do we have any questions thus far? All right, how are we all feeling? Good? Cool. All right, we're gonna get into chemistry and effects. And I'll leave time for a couple questions in between each section because it's a lot. We're going to talk about the two main compounds that Amanita muscaria has. Ibotenic acid and muscimol are the main psychoactive compounds. There are many other ones, but these are the main ones that we're going to be working with. So whenever an Amanita muscaria mushroom or a Amanita mushroom that contains muscimol, they have ibotenic acid in high amounts in the raw state. So ibotenic acid is a compound that stimulates glutamate. It's a neuroexcitatory compound. In large amounts, it can produce pretty negative side effects: nausea, vomiting, sweating, diarrhea, seizures. It can be really unpleasant. And the interesting thing, just tying it back to that Santa Claus mythology, was that the caribou would eat them, and whenever you eat a Amanita mushroom, you're actually decarboxylating it in your gut. So you could convert ibotenic acid to muscimol, not fully, but enough. So there's a theory that the indigenous people would drink the reindeer urine because they don't have things like lemons or ways to change the pH or dehydrating properly. So you could follow the caribou around and drink their pee and get high from that. So
some days it's all you need.
right. Yep.
That's
You
right.
gotta do what you gotta do, right? So, but in small amounts, ibotenic acid can be very euphoric. It can be very stimulating. It almost feels like Adderall, kind of energizing. I have a partially decarbed tincture I use before I go work out, and I have like crazy energy from that. But it's not something that I want like while I'm hanging out. I want a fully decarbed preparation whenever I'm just hanging out and wanting to go to sleep. So the ibotenic acid also has a potential for human neurotoxicity, causing brain lesions, but there's no evidence on oral consumption for humans that has led to brain lesions. But whenever they have done rat studies, they inject it intracranially, which is very different than if you consume it as a human. So, but I will say there is a very niche group of people who are like raw Amanita purists, and they're all crazy. So, just like they're like, I think there's something going on there. I think the jury's still out on that. Please decarboxylate your Amanitas. It's going to be a better time. So that's ibotenic acid, and then as we dehydrate the mushroom, as we boil it, as we change the pH, we're moving that ibotenic acid content down and then moving that muscimol content up, because ibotenic acid loses a carboxyl group and it turns into muscimol. Muscimol is a GABA agonist. It is therapeutic. It's a really wonderful compound. It's a GABA agonist. Other things that are GABA agonists are alcohol, benzodiazepine, lavender, chamomile, these calming, sedative, relaxing, and in even higher doses, deliriant, dissociative effects. So some things that it really helps people with is anxiety, depression, PTSD, and insomnia. So a lot of people that cannot sleep, maybe they sleep for like 2 to 3 hours at a time before waking up, they can take the Amanita and they'll sleep for 6 to 8 hours, and it's amazing for them. Also, it helps with inflammation too. So systemic inflammation, when taken internally or whenever applied topically as a tincture, oil, or salve, it can help with localized pain reduction. So muscle pain, joint pain, neuropathy, sciatica. It helps me with my carpal tunnel syndrome. There's not really many negative side effects found in my practice. I've served well over 10,000 people, and I've only had like very small fractions of percentages of negative side effects. Some of them being hypochondria or anxiety. Other ones might be slight irritability after like during the first like 4-week phase of like dosing. There might be some irritability. You might have headaches, very small amount of nausea or vomiting, and some people can experience slight lethargy. So the main contraindications you want to avoid with Amanita is alcohol, large doses of Amanita and benzodiazepines together. Anything that's activating the same receptor sites, the GABA receptors, you do not want to have. Any questions about the chemistry? Yep.
I wanted to ask also if you use cannabis
or you just talk completely from your experience, and also if you know, if it's good to use together. Or
Yeah. So
some
his,
people do.
yeah, great question. So his question was if I use cannabis or if you can use cannabis and Amanita together. And I don't use cannabis anymore, but there are a lot of people who use cannabis and Amanita together and have great results. They both work really well together. If cannabis is good medicine for you, go for it. I would just say, like, as always, like, start with one thing, develop a relationship with it, know how it works with your body, get to know the spirit of that medicine, and then see how they synergize together in small doses and work your way up to your desired result. You know, yeah. So, all right, going from picking to preparing. So, we are in the same area. I'm in Pennsylvania. The local Amanita muscarias, I think, are the Gisawii, the yellow fly agarics. I think they grow here as well. So these are a variety of Amanita muscaria. They may be reclassified as Amanita chrysoblema, but right now we'll just call it the yellow fly agaric. So these contain, they're not tryptamines, the muscimol and ibotenic acid. They're called isoxazoles. So these are isoxazole containing species in this area that you can pick, and right now is the time of the year where they are popping up. I have friends from North Carolina to Canada to Michigan, all through the East Coast that are picking them, and some other Amanitas that are psychoactive that grow here are the pantheroids. So we don't have a true Amanita pantherina in America, that grows in Europe, but we have pantheroid species or pantherinoides. So this is the Gisawii, the yellow fly agaric. It has a yellow cap, sometimes red, orange, even peach color. And then we have Amanita velatipes, which has like a lighter brown, kind of buff color. And then the multisquamosa has kind of like a buff white color. The pantheroids, it's really important to distinguish them between the death cap or the destroying angel, because they can look a little similar sometimes, but the yellow fly agaric is pretty easy to identify, although out of all of the muscimol containing Amanitas, the one we have actually has the most lookalikes. Luckily, none of them are poisonous. And also it's important to note that the pantheroids are basically the same, except for they are way stronger. The ones here, I'm not sure on that, but the pantherina in Europe, they're like 3 to 5 times stronger. And the ones in the West Coast, the pantherinoides, if you pick them right in the right season and first pick of the year, they might be like 20 or 30 times stronger. So those ones are no joke. Parker and I had a very deep trip with those last year, and it was a very powerful experience, unexpected. And also, this is not a complete list of the other Amanitas that grow in this area. So some of the continental, like North American ones. So in the south, we have Amanita persicina, which is that little pink area down in Georgia, Florida, Carolinas. And then the Gisawii, you can see here, has a very wide range, and I think it's actually even expanding. We also have the Amanita muscaria formosa and the Amanita muscaria flavolvulata, and they look very similar. They actually look like an Amanita muscaria from Europe. They're just red, they have white spots, a white shaggy stem. They're almost indistinguishable from the muscaria of Europe. We have a little chart here. Can't really see it that well, but So we're gonna go over just the local identification one real quick, because I'm assuming some of you would like to pick your own mushrooms. And so the cap size is 2 to 7 inches. Stems are typically 6 inches tall, inch and a quarter wide. The cap can be convex. Sometimes it can be concave. And if you are picking them and you're curious about ibotenic acid and it has just rained, you can take one of these cups and pull it out and drink the rainwater, and we call that dwarf wine. It's going to have ibotenic acid in it. It's going to give you a little boost of energy, and which could, you know, help you with fatigue while you're picking mushrooms.
Nice.
Yep. Just a little bit.
Right?
Yeah. Right. So they'll have white warts or veil remnant, typically, but if it's rained, the white warts can wash away. So, and also the cap color can change. So if it's exposed to sunlight or if it's older, it could be like white to like a cream color. And if it's rained, the warts could be completely gone. So the most important thing to kind of distinguish the Gissaui or the yellow fly agaric from other Amanitas is the base, which, where did it go? I don't know, I had a picture, but basically there's, the base is bulbous in the ground, and then there's typically 3 concentric rings around that base, right above it. And if you have a cap color that looks sketchy, and you can see that, that's like, and you're in the right area and the right time of year with the right tree associations, you can narrow in on what you are looking at. It's always best to consult with a professional or have a guide with you. Whenever I pick mushrooms, if I'm not sure about it, I always try to have 3 really good sources, like beyond a shadow of a doubt. I know 100%, like from 3 different sources, that this is what I'm looking at. Otherwise, I just pass it up because it's not worth trying to, you know, pick something and get sick over it, or, you know, potentially dying, because the phalloides and bisporgyria, the death cap and destroying angels, they have amatoxins in them, and they can kill you within 3 days. And 80% of people who eat them are dead within 1 week. Luckily, they don't really look like the muscaria or the yellow fly agaric, which is cool. One common myth is that muscaria contains hepatotoxic compounds which are toxic to the liver. It's not true, and they do not contain amatoxins. Only the death cap and destroying angels have the amatoxins. So some of the lookalikes, well, so the season is for the yellow fly agaric typically September through November. Sometimes it's even into July. It can start as early as June if the season's right. I've even picked them in December with snow on them. So you just got to keep looking out, and you're going to be looking for eastern white pine trees. I don't see any around here, but they also like spruce trees, native spruces, native pines, not introduced pines. They don't really have the mycorrhizal relationship with them. And also they can be found around some hardwoods. But in my experience, it's like the eastern white pine is like their favorite. Also spruce. So some lookalikes are the Amanita flavoconia, which is an edible Amanita. The praecox, which I believe is a pantheroid. Flavorubens is one of the blusher Amanitas. You guys, anybody familiar with blushers? So they're an edible Amanita, and there's like a big complex of different types of blushers, and they all have one characteristic which makes them a blusher, which is whenever you touch them or scrape them or a bug nibbles on them, they turn red, so they blush. Yeah, they're cute. Yeah, and the Flavorubens, it has a yellow cap, so that kind of throws it off from the Gissaui. Parcel vulvata is another edible Amanita. It has a red cap, it has a yellow shaggy stem. The warts look different, but it is edible. And Amanita frostiana is also kind of really hard to distinguish. And there's some theory that they might actually be the same mushroom. But yeah, so those are the lookalikes. Luckily, none of them are poisonous. All right, any questions about the identification? All good? Cool. So you properly identified your mushroom, you picked it, now you want to prepare it properly. So here's a dehydration chart, and you can choose a lot of different options here, and my personal sweet spot is around 50 or 60 degrees Celsius. And the reason why is because, and you're dehydrating this until it's cracker dry. The reason why is because if you dehydrate it on a really high temperature, your overall potency is lower because you're oxidizing all the compounds. Now, if you just did it like 50 or 60 degrees Celsius or even 40, you would get a higher amount of ibotenic acid. But if you're doing another decarb process, you're actually having at the end more muscimol, which is what we want for most people. So I like to do it like it's like 122 to 140 Fahrenheit in my dehydrator, and I do that until it's cracker dry. Depending on the size, it could be 12 hours, could be like 24 hours. And whenever you're dehydrating them, if you want to do it quicker, you can cut the stems in half and quarter them, and you can cut the caps. And whenever you're weighing out to prepare your tea, you're going to want to use caps mostly. You can save the stems because they do have alkaloids in them. It's not as much, and there's also other alkaloids in them that the cap doesn't have that some people have postulated could help you digest some of the compounds in the caps. So whenever I pick them, I save the stems, but whenever I'm making my own preparations, I'm mostly weighing the caps, and then I might throw in a little bit of stems because if you're using a lot of stems, it could throw off the potency because they're a lot weaker, basically.
Can you over dry your mushrooms?
Yeah, you can definitely nuke the hell out of them. You know, I mean, you can dehydrate them like 200 degrees or 300 degrees, and they may not have any ibotenic acid or muscimol afterwards.
And if you leave them too long, that would be the same as well? Or once
Leave
they're
them
cracker
outside?
Dry, no, once they're cracker dry.
Yeah.
Like, you forget it for a day, and,
Right.
you know.
Like leave it in the dehydrator.
What you had in there,
Yeah, it's best to just dehydrate them and then transfer them to an airtight container like glass with a desiccant pack and keep it in a cool, dark place as soon as you can. Life doesn't always allow that, but yeah. So on to preparation. So you got your Amanita, you picked it, you dehydrated it, and now you're ready to prepare it. So you could eat it raw, not recommended. If you do want to eat it raw, just try a nibble first. I did an experiment where I ate half of a cap raw, and I saved the other half, and I did like a full decarb, and I have a YouTube video, which was kind of funny, of me during the whole experience, and it was a wild experience. I would not recommend it, but I had to do it for science.
Yay, science.
Yeah. But it hit me in like 15 minutes. It was very fast, and I was vomiting for the first couple hours, and I couldn't eat anything. And throughout the day, I felt like I had taken like MDMA and alcohol. Like I was just like having a good time, but it was not very functional. It was fun, but I wouldn't recommend it.
You fast forward, you like time lapse that part, so we don't have to watch that.
No, I'm not throwing up in the video, but I was really calm. I was really calm. I was like, well, I threw up again, and I didn't want to, but I couldn't have any food or water.
Right.
That was the thing. I kept wanting to drink water,
Yeah.
and my body was like, nope, I'm not
Wow.
doing that. So
Yeah.
I dry fasted for like 4 hours,
Wow.
and I was fine after that. But
Yeah.
so let's say you picked a large batch of mushrooms. So the safest way to go about dosing them in a homogeneous and like predictable way is to take all the mushrooms and like grind them up and because the mushroom can vary in potency. There could be one mushroom growing right beside another one. It could be 10 times stronger or weaker. And so if you have a large batch, like an ounce, 2 ounces, whenever I do my tinctures, I'm doing like 3.3 pounds at a time. So it's a homogenized dose, it's averaged out, so you don't have a weak dose or a hot dose. And you could make a tea from that and then store that in the fridge or freeze it if you're not going to use it right away. It should be used probably within first 4 days. And that way you have a consistent dose that you can take. You can also make a tincture by taking the water extract and then adding it to alcohol. And that's a really easy way to dose it as well. So if you make a tea, you can do a full or partial decarb on it. If you just want to extract the compounds, it only takes 20 minutes in boiling water, and then you strain out the mushrooms. And I do recommend tea or tincture over just like straight up eating a bunch of caps. Like a nibble here or there is okay, but some people might experience gastrointestinal upset. Other practitioners I work with have mushrooms that their clients are eating, and it's very common to have gastro issues, but with my tinctures or people making tea, it doesn't seem as common. So I recommend the tea, full or partial decarb depending on what you like. If you want to do a full decarb, there's the Trent Austin study where basically it is you boil the mushrooms at 100 degrees Celsius for 150 minutes to 3 hours, and you change the pH to 3, which would either be straight lemon juice or adding citric acid to water, because lemon juice already has a pH of 3. If you add it to water, you're diluting the pH and you're going to raise it, so it wouldn't be, to the exact extent of the Austin study. There's a lot of different ways to consume this mushroom. It's kind of as versatile as cannabis. I like to call it the queen of the fungi, and cannabis is like the queen of the herbal world. And so I think they do really go well together for people who enjoy that. You can smoke it, the mushroom. You can actually just grind up the mushroom and smoke it. You get a little buzz from it. It's not the best way to go about it because you lose a lot of the potency. You can vape it. You can do a muscimol extraction where you get a muscimol isolate and vape that or smoke that. You can also make a shatter resin, which I just did the other day, which is kind of fun. It's very potent. You can also make a tincture or a salve. So you can apply it topically, you can eat it, you can smoke it, you can drink it. It's a very versatile mushroom. Maybe questions on all that before we get into dosing. All right. So we're going to talk about dosage and experience. So there's a lot of different experiences you can have with this mushroom, and I think that people like Terrence McKenna even did a disservice to this mushroom because he tried it a couple times and said, I got a headache or I was nauseous and nothing happened. And I think that one element of this mushroom is that it is like knowledge hidden behind closed doors. So if you don't have the patience for this mushroom, like you're not going to get anything from it. If you're coming in with ego, you're not going to get anything, or you're going to get a big slap on the face. So it's kind of like when you're patient, when you're humble, you can work with this mushroom in different preparations, then you can really gather a lot from it. And personally, I haven't worked with anything so slowly and consistently in my entire life. Like I've been like ADHD, scatterbrain, like on to the next thing, but this mushroom has intrigued me and held my attention for 3 years, and it hasn't let up. So I think that for starting off, people taking a microdose is like a really good way to become familiar with this mushroom. It's very mild. You can go about your day. You can work. You can operate machinery. Do your thing. I do like to have it, around bedtime too, whenever it's like me time. But for daytime use, it's helpful for just general anxiety, ADHD, kind of helps to silence the scatterbrain, focus on one thing at a time. I'll be trying to accomplish many things at once, and then I'll take the tincture and I'll realize that I just completed one task, and then I completed one more task, and I forgot that I took the tincture, and that's why I'm actually able to get something done that day. And so the dose size depends on the preparation, the person, and the age of the mushrooms, and the quality of the extraction. So, and the variety as well. Yes. Yep. So if you're taking a pantheroid or a pantheroid, you need way less of it, and I wouldn't recommend anybody starting off with a panther cap. But the muscaria, the range is typically like 25 or 50 milligrams to about 3 grams or 3,000 milligrams. And I find that people need more of a microdose when they're eating dry caps. It's not as bioavailable, so your body's digesting everything still. Whenever you have a tea or a tincture, it's just like bioavailable, it's ready to go. It hits you fast, and it's more effective. So yeah, some of the effects you might have are, anxiolytic, increasing creativity, relief from depression, lethargy. Helps me also with my lethargy with Lyme disease that I have. But you're able to function normally as you would. It's supposed to be sub-perceptual. Then we have the threshold dose, which I kind of call the sweet spot, where that's anywhere from 2 grams to 15 grams. And that's a really wide range, I understand. And the reason why is because it's really hard, even with a very homogenized dose, to find out what kind of effects you're going to be having. And that's why I think too, it's like, if you take a large batch of tea and you can freeze portions of it, and you know how many grams are in the volume, then you can kind of work with that batch and then titrate up. Like, okay, I want to double that, or I want to triple that, or I want to take half that amount. That way, because if you make a new batch, you can make it differently, or different mushrooms, and you might have a different experience. So the threshold dose is kind of fun. I really like this more for nighttime use. It might be fine in a social setting, but it's not really that kind of mushroom. It's not really something that you want to do at a festival, unless you're really having like a ceremony at the end of the day or something, or like what we just did. So with the threshold dose, you can have time distortion, euphoria, size distortion, feeling uninhibited, unguarded. I like to use it whenever I'm singing or expressing myself. It's really helpful to silence the inner judge and just allow that spontaneity to come forth. Also, it can help foster the ability to move through major trauma when coupled with other mindfulness practices like breath work or IFS therapy, different kind of things like that. I would not be operating machinery. I would not be going to work. I mean, even if you could, it's not a good time. This is time for you. And it's really helpful in that threshold dose to be for healing PTSD. The cool thing about that threshold dose is that you still have your wits about you. You might have like time dilation and trance-like kind of effects, but you're still here. And the hero doses are very intense, and I would not recommend them. If you are feeling called to that, I think that there's like a prerequisite, like 6 to 12 months of microdosing and threshold dosing, and really, really getting guidance from this mushroom, and preparing yourself. And this should be done with not just a trip sitter or a guide, but somebody who works with this mushroom specifically, because it can have different effects than classical psychedelics like psilocybin or LSD. This is deep shamanic work. It's not for fun. You know, I have a lot of people come to me and they go, you know, how much do I take the trip? I'm like, you don't want this. Like, go take some psilocybin. Like, go have fun. Like, yeah, you can do deep work with psilocybin, but you can also have a fun time with your friends. This is more like, you know, typically you're laying down or like it's hard to stand. And the hero doses start at like 15, 20, 30 grams. And I know people who've even taken like 60 grams at a time. And yeah, it's not for the faint of heart. And I myself and other people I've worked with have taken high doses of other psychedelics, and people who've had high dose Amanita trips, they've always said like this is way more intense than like DMT or ayahuasca or even iboga. Really high doses are very intense. But if you're a psychonaut and you are you know, in that shamanic lineage, this is a really powerful medicine. And should not be overlooked. Some of the negative side effects or the difficult experiences could be looping, like mental looping, echo pictures, so like it's like snapshots of reality where you're not like having a congruent vision. You can have intense size distortion, time dilation, blacking out, amnesia, forgetting if you're asleep or if you're dreaming. It's very disorienting. It's almost kind of like being drunk and tripping at the same time. It's very intense. And I've been there, so I know. And you can have you know, muscle twitching, nausea, vomiting, and feeling impervious to pain. So you can also, like I said, black out and, you know, not know where you are. So it's really important to have, you know, if you have a trip sitter with you, somebody who's like physically stronger than you in case you need to actually be restrained. Yeah. And then common themes with these hero doses are experiencing the beginning or end of time, experiencing alternate timelines, seeing the threads of the fabric of reality, and being able to choose a new timeline. So, any questions about the experience? Yeah. Yeah, so the tinctures are for microdosing, and the highest strength one I have has 15 grams in the entire bottle. But you should be only taking like 5 drops at first for the high strength one, and then some people will take, you know, even up to 4 dropperfuls if they're experienced. And everybody's microdose is a little different. So, yeah. Yep. Anybody else? Good? Mm-hmm. How are we all feeling?
Good.
Nice.
Good.
So, just gonna kind of gloss. Do anybody know what time it is? 1:30?
1:40.
140.
Oh, jeez. All right. I'm gonna try to rush through this, but so, what's up? I think after this. Yeah. Thanks.
I have one quick question.
Yeah.
So with the caps that you passed out, what's like the best way to utilize those?
So you could continue to nibble those if you'd like, or you could make a tea from them.
So like a tea from like 1 cap would be like the threshold dose?
No, probably unless it was a really big one.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not. And I would weigh it. I would weigh it out. But keep in mind that cap's potency, it's just 1 cap, so you don't really know. So it's always good to start small. Just have like a little sip, or like, you know, measure it out.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Have you ever dealt with sun-dried Amanita muscaria? I've been up in the mountains up in Colorado several times where they're just dried, like cracker dry in the sun.
Yeah.
And I have this theory that the sun is, you know, magical or something. It might impart something to it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've heard that, and it is interesting too that Amanita muscaria is a very nutritious mushroom. It has like the highest amount of vitamin D compared to any other mushroom. I would say like if you're gonna dehydrate it in the sun, it's probably gonna have more ibotenic acid in it, but it's also gonna have more muscimol in theory, because you're not using a lot of heat. But over time, if you're not doing that quickly, the sun degrades compounds like pretty rapidly. So I would say as long as it's like dried within a day, it's probably pretty good. Yeah.
And another quick question. I found a patent that used Lactarius plantarum for ibotenic acid and muscimol. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, was that Trent Austin's study that part of it?
I can't remember the fellow's name, but
Yeah.
online.
Yeah, so that's so you're talking about fermentation, right?
You know, I don't know what.
Lactarius or lactobacillus?
It's a bacteria.
Okay, so Trent Austin had a study on that where he fermented. He used lactobacillus, which is the bacteria used in fermentation process, to convert the ibotenic acid to muscimol. Yeah. So I haven't done that yet. That's one preparation I would like to do. But yeah, so we're just gonna like basically gloss through this real quick. Products to avoid. So there's a lot of Amanita products on the market now, and a lot of them unfortunately are really poor quality. They might have other psychedelics in them, like psilocybin or THC or synthetic muscimol. I can go way deeper into that if anybody wants to talk about that, but the group that I'm a part of, I'm an admin in the biggest Amanita group on Facebook, and we were able to work with a lab and get $30,000 worth of testing done for free on some of these mainstream products, and found that some of them didn't contain muscimol, some of them had psilocybin in them, and then we had other user reports that they had THC in them. So there's a lot of concern about this. The FDA is looking into Amanita companies now that have nutritional data facts, because you're not allowed to sell this mushroom for human consumption. It is legal in the United States. It is illegal in some countries, and it's also technically illegal in Louisiana for consumption. But you can have it as ornamental purposes. So